Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. News on Channel 2. Thank you for joining us, and we start with our news headlines. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi meets with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Ministers of Planning and Finance. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry delivers Egypt's speech in the summit of the heads of states and governments of the non-aligned movement in Azerbaijan. And more Russian military police arrive in Syria under peace deal with Turkey. And now to the news in full. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Ministers of Planning and Finance, as well as Executive Manager of Egypt's Fund. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Bassam Radi said that during the meeting, President al-Sisi gave his directives to exert utmost effort to continue the economic reform path, hailing the positive outcome of such reforms on the country's economic indicators. The President also gave his directives to promote and upgrade the country's tax system. The head of state also reviewed the investment sector, urging the government to take needed procedures to attract and encourage investments to provide new job opportunities for youths. President al-Sisi also stressed the importance of applying modern technologies to create an appropriate atmosphere to attract investments in various fields. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry delivered a speech before the 18th summit of the heads of states and governments of the non-aligned movement, the NAM, in Baku, Azerbaijan. During the speech, Shoukry stressed the importance of taking the appropriate actions towards the countries that are supporting terrorism. He assured that it is necessary to follow a comprehensive plan to combat terrorism. Shoukry also called for an immediate end to the Turkish aggression against Syria. He confirmed Egypt's firm stance on preserving the unity and sovereignty of Syrian territories and achieving the aspirations of its people. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister affirmed that the sustainable development is one of the main means to face conflicts, calling the international aid and funding institutions to help the developing countries to launch projects that will achieve developments to their people.
يمر العالم بمفترق طرق لتستمر مصر كما كانت دوما ركيزة أساسية لاستعادة الأمن والاستقرار في الشرق الأوسط. ولا يسعني إلا أن أؤكد رفض مصر للتدخل الأجنبي في الشؤون العربية، فقد آن الأوان أن تستعاد مؤسسات الدولة الليبية وتقوم مصر بدور نشط لجمع الفرقاء الليبيين. إن نزيف الدم في سوريا وغياب الأفق السياسي أمر لم يعد مقبولا استمراره، فالمطلوب واضح: وحدة سوريا وسلامتها الإقليمية. لا تدخر مصر جهدا لدعم وحدة اليمن وسلامته الإقليمية. وفي وسط تلك التحديات التي يموج بها النظام الدولي، إلا أن مصر استطاعت أن تحافظ على استقرارها وسط محيط إقليمي شديد الاضطراب في ضوء ارتباط الأمن القومي العربي بما فيه أمن الخليج العربي بأمن مصر. على البشرية أن تستعيد جوهر إنسانيتها والوصول إلى عالم أكثر أمناً ورخاءً لأجيالنا القادمة.
Russia has sent hundreds of additional troops to Syria to help patrol the country's Turkey-Syria border after a deal between Moscow and Ankara. More details in the following report.
Syrian army reaches border area, deploys around Turkish zone. Syrian troops reached the key area near Turkish border today after sending further reinforcements to the region in what a war monitor said was its largest deployment there in years. Syrian government forces entered the provincial borders of the town of Ras Al Ain. The government forces entered the area, which was taken by Turkish forces following a weeks-long offensive against Syria's Kurds. Troops also deployed along a road stretching some 30 kilometers south of the frontier. Turkey and its Syrian proxies on October 9th launched a cross-border attack against Kurd-held areas, grabbing a 120-kilometer-long swath of Syrian land along the frontier. The incursion left hundreds dead and caused 300,000 people to flee their homes. This week, Turkey and Russia struck a deal in Sochi for more Kurd forces to withdraw from the frontier on both sides of that Turkish-held area under the supervision of Russian and Syrian forces. For its part, the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said some 2,000 Syrian troops and hundreds of military vehicles were deploying around what Turkey calls its safe zone. Moscow has said that 300 Russian military police had arrived in Syria to help ensure Kurd forces withdraw to a line 30 kilometers from the border in keeping with Tuesday's agreement. Despite today's deployment, the observatory said that Kurd fighters and Ankara's Syrian proxies traded artillery fire in the region. There were no immediate reports of casualties.
Iraqi security forces sought to clamp down on protests in Baghdad and across the south today, a day after dozens died in a bloody resumption of anti-government rallies. Parliamentary session scheduled for today afternoon to discuss the renewed protest was cancelled after it failed to reach a quorum since anti-government rallies first erupted on October 1st. Nearly 200 people have died and thousands were wounded in Baghdad and across the country's Shiite majority south in violence condemned worldwide. Demonstrators in Lebanon blocked roads and trickled into streets across the country for a 10th consecutive day today, defying what they said were attempts by Hezbollah to defuse their movement. The demonstrators, who have thronged towns and cities across Lebanon since October 17th, are demanding the removal of the entire political class, accusing many across different parties of systematic corruption. Numbers have declined since October 20th, when hundreds of thousands took over Beirut and other cities in the largest demonstrations in years, but could grow again over the weekend. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn to man up and accept a snap election as EU members delayed a decision on how long to postpone next week's Brexit deadline. Senior diplomats said that they would decide by late Monday or early Tuesday next week, shortly before Britain is currently scheduled to break away from the bloc on Thursday. At home, Johnson wants to call an election for December 12th that he hopes will give him a majority to pass the divorce deal he struck with EU leaders last week. But his government is struggling to secure the two-thirds majority it needs in a parliamentary vote scheduled for Monday to force the election. Fitch Solutions expected Egypt's real gross domestic product growth to reach a strong rate of 5.7% during the current fiscal year, up from 5.6% achieved in 2018-2019 fiscal year. Institution added that recent decisions by the central bank to cut key interest rates supported the increase of private sector investments. It noted that a recent decline in inflation rates along with the recent cut in interest rates will contribute in increasing consumer demands. Fitch Solutions also expected a further cut in interest rates by the central bank by 200 points by the year 2020. The U.S. Treasury announced that America's budget deficit soared to nearly $1 trillion in the 2019 fiscal year as government borrowing swelled. The fourth straight year of broadening budget gaps underscored a new tolerance for yawning fiscal imbalances in the current political era. The persistent increase in government borrowing also runs counter to U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign pledges in 2016 to eliminate or at least significantly reduce America's $19 trillion debt load. The fiscal 2019 deficit jumped by 26% to $984 billion, the highest since 2012, as spending outstripped tax receipts in the wake of the 2017 Republican-led tax cuts. The U.S. Trade Representative's office said that Washington and Beijing are making headway on key issues in their ongoing trade dispute, and discussions will continue. U.S. President Donald Trump heralded a major win in his offensive against China 2 weeks ago, saying the economic powers were close to concluding a substantial Phase 1 deal. However, the details were and remain scarce, and the two sides have not announced rollbacks of existing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars in trade. The White House held off on a massive tariff increase planned for October 15th on $250 billion in Chinese goods, but new 15% tariffs on another $150 billion in goods are still scheduled for December.